One of the great principles of negotiation that I love is never take a no from someone who's not qualified to give you a yes. So it's okay to, I always ask nicely. I never, um, yeah.
Welcome to This is Supercritical, a podcast where experience, equity, and expertise intersect to extract the essence of what's happening in the cannabis industry today. You can find this podcast on your favorite streaming service and at supercritical.agency, the only place you need to go for all of your cannabis content. Today, we're discussing growing and scaling startups. I believe that the most critical aspect of growth is clarity of purpose, understanding the value of your business, what it provides, the market it serves, and its delivery mechanisms. Without that, massive amounts of time, money, and human capital can be wasted on pursuing the wrong types of growth. Sustainable, profitable growth requires managing well the delicate balance between the pursuit of market opportunities, the external, and the creation of capabilities and capacity needed to exploit those opportunities, the supply. And while sustained profitable growth is a universal aspiration, it's an elusive goal for many companies. Our guest today, Azuca co-founder and CEO Kim Sanchez Rael, has found that balance, achieving annualized growth of 2,600% over the past few years and earning Azuca a ranking of number 214 on this year's Inc. 5000 list of the fastest growing companies. Kim, welcome to This is Supercritical. So let's go back to the beginning of Azuca. Would you share with us the origin story, how you and Ron came together? What's the company's mission, its North Star?
Sure. It was, sometimes I call Ron and I the odd couple of cannabis, right? We're very, very different. Ron set out many years ago as a chef and a longtime, lover of the cannabis plant and its magic to solve the edibles problem. So slow onset, hard to predict, just a lot of people were having bad experiences with edibles. So Ron set out to solve that problem. I came from a very different background. Most of my career was in tech and finance. I was a venture capitalist. I was an investor in early stage tech startups. I spent 7 years at Intel, in the semiconductor computer chip part of the world, and had started an advanced energy company. And it was really an introduction from a business school classmate of mine to Ron. He had met Ron and said, "Hey, I've met this great guy in New York. He's developed these interesting formulations and he needs a CEO." And at that time, I was pivoting out of tech. I really had decided that I love to do startups, but I was really finished with the tech world, and was exploring new stage of my career in wellness, which had been a long time passion of mine, but my career had always been in tech and finance. So long story short, I met Ron and I thought what he was doing was interesting, but I didn't think I was the right CEO. And I said no twice. And over the course of 6 months,
I didn't realize you had said no twice.
This courting went on for 6 months. And the third time, Ron, because I live in Albuquerque, Ron is in New York City. And I honestly didn't know anything about cannabis. So I was thinking about wellness and was still in that kind of Nancy Reagan brainwash, just say no. I was completely ignorant.
Were you friends with Mr. T?
Yes, that was my generation, my childhood, right? And so the third time that Ron said, what I've invented is really cool. I want to launch a company. I need a CEO. The third time he asked me over the course of months, I was actually moving my middle child to New York City to start college. And it was one of those things in life where the synchronicity of, here I am in New York. There's this business opportunity in New York. I think I'm supposed to be spending more time in New York right now. So I finally said yes. And originally, actually, what I said to Ron was, I won't agree to be the CEO of this yet to be formed company, but I'll agree to pretend to be CEO for 90 days. And the reason
Okay.
I did that, the reason I did that is, I'd been in a number of different business partnerships over, 25, 30 years of my career. And I really care deeply about who I work with. There is no room in my life for toxic people. There's no room in my life for unethical people. And I didn't know Ron. So I said at the end of 90 days, if I will do due diligence on the industry. I will understand the formulations, these fast acting, cannabis formulations. And at the end of 90 days, if this doesn't look like a great opportunity for both of us, and we're not like, in love with each other to, form a partner, because business is hard, right? We're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes working on things. At the end
Super
of 90
hard.
days, if it's not working, no harm, no foul. I'll leave. You don't owe me a dime. Won't take any equity in this company. So that was how we started. It was really all about this intersection between wellness and the love of the cannabis plant and the desire to solve the edibles problem for consumers. And you asked about our North Star. It's interesting. I was just looking at our very first board deck from 2018, Kerry, and the North Star has not changed. And the North Star, or the why, the ultimate why. And at that time, I was using the framework from the Lean Startup framework, right? The
Hmm.
the DNA pyramid, just as a way to organize our thinking. And the why was really to share the goodness, to bring the goodness of the cannabis plant to people in a way that was understandable, approachable, and where people could really experience the goodness of the plant. And that why has never changed.
I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. So I know that Azuca is an extremely innovative company. Would you tell us a bit more about how you continue to innovate while still having uniformity in your products and in your clients' products as they come to market?
Sure. So, as I said, we set out to solve the edibles problem, a fast onset, predictability, and taste. And all of our formulations do that. But what we have done over, since the company launched is we continuously innovate on these formulations. And we developed what I call the Intel Inside model, which is we are this um, set of formulations that partners with brands and manufacturers to make their edibles products the very best that they can be. Um, and again, I like to use tech analogies because I grew up in the technology world. Every year, we're releasing one or two new advanced formulations that we then license to partners for their products.
So when you do this, and how does that approach help you scale your business? And therefore, how does it help your clients scale their businesses as you're growing together?
Yeah, so as you know, cannabis is the weirdest industry on the planet because in most industries, you kind of nail it and scale it. In cannabis, because you cannot move infused products across state lines yet, um, we had to figure out a way to enable ourselves to scale and also our partners to scale in multiple states. So we created a system that I call distribute and infuse. Right. So the what we do is we create these advanced formulations. So think of it as one of our brand partners is Wana, and they have the Wana Quick line and the Wana Optimals line as an example. And we're the formulation that makes the Wana Quick quick, right? That we make the fast onset, predictable onset and offset for that product. Um, and but you can't move the products across state lines. So we developed a line of what is branded as activators, and these are non-infused precursor ingredients. We sell them in nice little bottles like this, and we ship those anywhere in the world because they're non-infused. And again, that's like the secret sauce. That's our intellectual property. We can ship them anywhere in the world. So if you are a brand like Wana, you will license our formulations as something that powers your brand, your formulation, because it's their gummy, right? and we will ship the activator anywhere in the world where they are producing. So, for example, I think one is in something like 16 states. We ship activator anywhere in the world, and then they're infused in that state's regulated market and sold in that market. So it was really a challenge to figure out how to scale a business in the regulated cannabis market because of the no interstate commerce restrictions.
Yeah, there's no textbook for that, really. So one of my favorite researchers on the topic of growth and scaling is Harvard Business School professor Gary Pisano. And a lot of what he writes about with scaling is that there are certain forces in the market that everybody's going to have to face, and you can either attack them, go around them, but somehow you're going to have to address them. And that a lot of people don't do that well and end up with self-inflicted wounds that will inhibit their scaling. So how have you and Ron and the Azuca team avoided some of these self-inflicted wounds as you continue to grow?
So a couple of things. Early in my career, I actually worked on Capitol Hill. I was a legislative aide in the U.S. Senate. And one of the things that gave me great concern when I first joined the industry in 2017 was I heard a lot of stories about people raising a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, and betting their business model on congressional action. And
That's scary.
I would, yes.
It's not a winning strategy.
I would never bet my business model or my financials or my investment thesis on any regulatory body changing something, first of all. And in particular, the US Congress, because of the nature of that institution. So I think that some of the self-inflicted wounds in our industry have been imprudent bets on regulatory changes that didn't come and still haven't. Right. So I think that's a huge issue. I think the other self-inflicted wound that I've watched teams make is, it's very basic. It's hiring the wrong people. And, we have one of my favorite authors is actually Jim Collins, who wrote Great and Great by Choice. And he was a teacher of mine at Stanford Business School. And, one of his principles in Good to Great is first who, then what. And you get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus and the right people in the right seats on the bus. And I think one of the biggest self-inflicted wounds that I've seen businesses make is not hiring the right people. And when they hire the wrong people, not addressing that quickly.
So when you were at Stanford, did you take any classes on entrepreneurism? And if so, when you were going about starting Azuca, and you're a multi-time founder, do you apply that textbook model of growth to Azuca, or did you come up with something completely independent on your own?
There were two really great and quite well-known entrepreneurship classes when I was at Stanford Business School, and I took both of them. And one of the most powerful exercises that you just can't, you can't unlearn is the power of managing your cash, and how obviously your business can fail if you run out of cash, but your business can also fail if you grow too fast and you don't have cash to fuel your growth. So that is just, everything is cash, every startup I've ever invested in. And it's not complicated, right? I've seen some, people create ridiculous, sophisticated financial models. And I'm like, throw that away. I'm going to give you one Excel spreadsheet template that is a flat sheet, and I want you to fill it out on a month-by-month basis, or if things are really tight, a week-by-week basis. It's all about managing cash, for startups. So that is one thing, for sure. The other thing that I would say is, one of Jim Collins, I'll stick with Jim Collins because he really is my favorite business author. One of his later books is called Great by Choice. And Great by Choice is a book where the research question he posed was, how and why do some organizations and companies thrive in times of great uncertainty and chaos and others fail? So the premise is, in the ecosystem of chaos and uncertainty, which there's nothing like, cannabis is the epitome of that, right?
It
Because
absolutely is. If it's nothing else, it's definitely chaos and uncertainty.
absolutely. So that is I would recommend that book to any entrepreneur to begin with, but in particular, anybody in cannabis or, and I can talk more about some of the principles that we've applied, but definitely thinking about how do you thrive in chaos, because there is no formula. There's no cookbook recipe. So, it's all about hiring the right people and, constantly scanning the environment, scanning the ecosystem for what's changing, what do we need to do, what's our offense, what's our defense. Cannabis is like nothing I've ever done before.
Same for me. And sometimes it's hard to know where to go for that guidance or to get those insights. I know you and I first got to know each other through the International Women's Forum, an organization that comprises about 8,000 women leaders around the globe. I'm a member of IWF Chicago, you're IWF New Mexico. And
Mhm.
with that, we have an extensive network of thought leaders that we can reach out to and we can go to for advice that we may need or for resources that we need. What do you suggest for those founders that might not have such a network as to where they can go to help scale their businesses, to help them grow? And does that advice differ for female founders?
So, one of the great things about, God bless the internet, right? I use the internet as a mentor. I still do, even at this stage in my career. And I look for advisors that I may have never met, but may have faced the types of problems I've faced. So, uh, I mean, it's cliche, but I literally will look for YouTube videos on people addressing the types of business problems I've seen. And, I've got a lot of fancy degrees and, now almost 30 years out of business school. But I still have questions and hit problems that I haven't seen. So I would just don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to, knock on those doors. The other thing this is just a simple little trick. Like if I called you, Kerry, and said, "Hey, Kerry, I'm looking for a lead in, um, Nevada or Ohio," and you said, "Hey, Kim, I don't know anybody in that market. So sorry." I like to say, "Well, is there one or two people that you might recommend I could ask the same question?" And just really, you can always ask. If someone says no, say, "Is there one or two people you would recommend I talk to?" And they can say no, but one of the great principles of negotiation that I love is never take a no from someone who's not qualified to give you a yes. So it's okay to,
I love that.
I always ask nicely. I never,
Exactly. Well,
yeah.
in the asking is the receiving. If you never ask, you're
Right.
not going to find out. And I share that advice with my daughters, with the young women that I mentor in different programs here in
Yeah.
Chicago. And it's imperative. You have to know what you want, you have to ask for it, and you have to go after it and find it on your own if you can't get help in getting good directions. So I
Yeah.
know that
The other advice. Oh, I was going to say for women in particular, the other thing that I like to share with women, especially women earlier in their careers, is, I really believe that you can have it all as women, but not necessarily all at the same time. So I've started several companies. Had a wonderful career for 7 years at Intel. I've done some really cool things, but I took the mommy ramp. I was a stay-at-home mom in between for a couple of years. I left one of my businesses because my husband ran for governor, and I became a full-time political wife. So I abandoned my career twice for family, and I think if you're paying attention to yourself and you know, what you really are passionate about as a woman and as a mom, if you choose to have children, um, that you can have it all, but sometimes, there's a sequencing of things. So I would just encourage women to not beat themselves up. We beat ourselves up so much, and give yourself a break, give yourself a hug, give yourself a year off if that's what you need, and that's okay. It's okay to stay home with that baby for a year or two or longer, however long you want to. It doesn't mean your career is dead. Um, just really
Absolutely agree with
listen to
you.
yourself and give
And
yourself
I've made
those
choices
rings.
like that myself as well. It's important to do what's right for you and to keep growing. I think that's the most important takeaway here. Now, jumping into your past experience as an investor and
Mhm.
a VC particularly, we know the data show that women are severely underfunded with their startups. Do you have thoughts to share with our audience that can help them close that gap, the funding gap?
It's a numbers game. It's like any sales funnel. Like, you just have to, as women, I think you have to be prepared for a lot of no's. When we raised, I was a venture capitalist. We raised a couple of funds, and I think it was like 400 no's for 10 yeses. So I think that if you're an entrepreneur, and particularly if you're a woman, because the math is kind of against you. The data is pretty clear. I think you just have to keep going and keep going. And smart investors look for primarily the team. So if you're a female founder, make sure you have the right team to execute on the business opportunity that you're presenting, that you're going to execute against. I've seen entrepreneurs make the mistake of they take a former colleague or a friend or someone, and they become co-founders, and they all have chief something titles, and maybe the female founder is qualified, and prepared to be that founder CEO, but your bestie might not be the right CFO, right? So really think about your
Yeah,
team,
exactly.
and think about it from the eyes of an investor who's going to be writing a check.
That's so important. I agree. The other thing, too, in a lot of conversations around startups and ventures funding,
Mhm.
you'll hear what is the financial runway. No one really addresses the emotional runway that goes hand in hand with trying to get the financial resources together to keep the runway open. And I think that's really important, just to make sure that you have a good mindset around just how hard it is and how long it may take. And as you were saying at the beginning of our conversation, know what your North Star is and hang on to that. Don't be afraid to pivot if you need to, make changes where necessary, but really that high conviction will help carry you through.
Yes. I mean, I like to say, like, everything in my life has that I've done that's been worth doing has been hard. Right? I have a little picture of Mount Hood on my shelf behind me, because it reminds me. At one point when I was young, I rode a bicycle across the country, and biking over Mount Hood was really, really, really hard. And but it's one of the greatest things I've ever done. It's just a reminder that you know, great things can be really hard.
Definitely. They always are, but they're so worth it.
Yes.
So for those founders that are looking to launch a brand, what might it take for them to work with Azuca?
So
How do those
we
partnerships develop?
One of the things that we really pride ourselves on is we have designed our business process, our business model, and our activator process so that we can work with very small emerging brands, and we can also work with the largest brands. So, for example, we work with, I mentioned Wana on their fast acting line and their optimals, their functional line. We work with Cannabis, formerly Columbia Care, on their heady line. We work with GTI, but we work with Acreage. But one of our other brands is Cake, which is an entrepreneur out of Delaware, New Jersey, who is a social equity entrepreneur. So we also have a social equity fellowship where we will
Oh, that's right.
coach and work
I love
with
that.
a social equity fellow to help them launch their brand with Azuca inside, is what we call the model. So and the way our licensing process works, as I said earlier, we license the formulations, and then we sell the activator, the non-infused precursor, as part of the license agreement. That license agreement is set up so that if you are a small brand, or if you're a producer in a state with a small market, there are no minimum order quantities. There's no big startup costs. We are a pay-as-you-go model, so we can be as small as a single product in a smaller state like Alaska, all the way to the largest brands. So if a large organization wants to work with us, they would come into our pipeline, and we would work with them on which products they want to launch with a fast acting SKU. And what I'd add here also is we talk about fast acting, but the other big differentiator in the products that use Azuca Time Infusion is that the consumer actually experiences what people describe as a smoker's high in an edible form, right? So it's the Delta 9, it's the euphoric effect of the THC of the cannabis, but without smoking it. And that's because the way we encapsulate the THC molecule, it enables the body to absorb the molecule while it's still in the Delta 9 THC form, which gives you that euphoric effect. And traditional edibles are primarily, when you consume an edible, it's metabolized by your liver into something called 11-hydroxy-THC, which is that form of THC, which gives you that couch lock sedative effect. So lots of benefits for the consumer to have these advanced formulations, and also for the brands, because you can really deliver a much more interesting euphoric effect to your consumers with Azuca inside. One other thing I would add to that is when we set out and created our company values back in the early days, feels like forever ago, our number one core value is helpfulness. And we're very intentional about that value. And what that means is if you're our brand partner, we bend over backwards to be helpful to you. We will help and guide with formulations. We will do bud tender training in your market for, why are these products differentiated? We have a great PR team that will work with our partner brands. So if you're a small company and you don't have a PR team, we'll bring all of that. And it's just part of the partnership. We don't charge for that. We don't nickel and dime. It's just part of the relationship. And it's all wrapped in that value of helpfulness.
It is. You have an amazing team. I mean, obviously, you're a Collins fan, and you did get all the right people on the bus in the right seats. So well done there. I've a couple more questions for you. I'm very curious to know, what do you believe is the most supercritical challenge facing the cannabis industry today that may impede growth and scaling?
I think it's cash. It's absolutely cash. 280E is an unfair structural barrier in this industry that constrains cash.
Unfair.
Yeah. And then, you have the constraints in the capital markets that are particularly challenging for cannabis, because a lot of institutional investors can't touch cannabis while it's federally illegal. I think that will change someday. But in the interim, it really is companies having enough cash to grow their business. And 280E, when 280E leaves the room, which I hope it is this year, I think that will be a game changer for the industry.
I do too, because there are so many great businesses out there that are struggling financially because they're not being paid by their suppliers. They're not getting paid by their vendors. And all of it is just really, really troubling. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to endure when you can't move products across state lines, or you can't have federal funding assistance and everything else that other startup businesses would have. So extra challenge there. Mm-hmm. Well, where can our listeners find out more about Azuca, and how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Our website is azucatime.com. And it's also our at Azuca is our social handle, and at Azuca Time. And then I'm on LinkedIn constantly. I'm the only Kim Sanchez Rael on LinkedIn. So that is a great platform to communicate and learn more about us. And also, if you DM me on LinkedIn, I will absolutely answer. So Kim Sanchez Rael.
Kim, thanks so much for taking time to join us on This is Supercritical. You can check out all of our podcasts at supercritical.agency. And please take advantage of Supercritical's complimentary 20-minute consulting session with all of our cannabis experts. Until next time, thank you for joining. March is Women's History Month. And in the spirit of equity and inclusion, I want to take a moment to say thanks to Supercritical's AI note taker, Fireflies, also affectionately known in Supercritical's world as the Mansplaining Monitor, the Appropriator Barometer, or the Manterrupter Manifesto, depending on who's in the meeting. What I love about Fireflies is that it shows in black and white the number of times people interrupt, voice an idea previously shared by another, or explain the obvious. As a woman who does have a seat at the proverbial table, this still happens to me with regularity. Rather than complain, I want to offer you a few simple tactics to turn the tables. First, don't take interruptions of your thoughts personally or internalize them. For the most part, interrupting women is unconscious. Call it out if you see it, get back to the conversation, and repeat yourself as often as needed. If you voice an idea only to have someone else bring it up as their own later in the conversation after you've shared it, remind that fellow meeting attendee of your original thought and thank the appropriator for coming back to your idea. And be an ally. If someone's doing this in a meeting, you can always chime in and say, I thought that was a great idea when Kerry brought it up 15 minutes ago. Don't get minimized. As for mansplaining, I'd like to reply to that person by thanking the splainer for the recap, but I'd heard a better or different explanation of it when I was studying the topic in grad school. My final thoughts on AI note-taking: let's all of us stay engaged and check yourself against your fireflies.